Okay, today's daf, Bez Hashem, is daf Tzadik in Masechta Baba Basra. And we are discussing fascinating things where the Gemara is discussing how to run a business very honestly. And we learned yesterday that the importance of being so super honest in your business is that you're guaranteed to be wealthy. The Gemara says if you keep your measures precise and you don't have faulty measures in your business, a faulty scale, etc., a faulty cup, a faulty measuring cup, then you're going to eventually have a lot of money. So the Gemara says like this: Ein Ein Oisin Tan Rabbanan, Ein Oisin Tan Rabbanan. We learned in the Brisa. Pay test summit base. We're just going to catch up over here. Ein Oisin Hamachat Shel Dadlas V'Bnei Shuhu Kal Loy Shel Matchim V'Bnei Shu Machbid. Our Loy Seir Shel Zayis or Shel Ego Shel Shikma V'Shel Shbroya. The machak is, you can see on the picture over here, is the smoother. Let's call it the smoother. Let's say you're filling somebody up with some wheat or whatever it is. So you have a certain tool that smooths it out, so it levels the cup, the utensil that the person bought. So again, if you're gonna use a severe heavy utensil like this, a heavy smoother, then it's going to take too much out, and the purchaser is going to get ripped off. If you have a light one, then the seller is going to end up heaping more than he's getting paid for. So you have to make it out of the precise material. So the Gemara says, don't make it out of a gourd because it's too light. Don't make it out of metal because it's too heavy. But you make this brush, I don't know what you want to call it, make it out of zayis, make it out of olive wood, or walnut wood, or sycamore wood, Michelle Esbroira, I think it's another type of wood. So they give you the materials to make it so that nobody gets ripped off having a faulty smoother. Tanarabbanam. You can't make it the machet. You see on this picture, one side is thicker and the other side is thinner. So you can imagine that if it depends if you're selling or buying, by using the side that's advantageous to you, you'll end up, if you're a seller, you're going to take off more than you're supposed to. And if you're a buyer and you have this kind of tool, you're going to take in more than you need to. So it's because it's a tricky type of machat. It's a tricky type of smoother. It has to be even. Lo yimchai, and we say like this. So one side should not be thick and the other side should be short. Lo yimchai bevas achas. You shouldn't, smooth out the vessel at one time. Whoever does it at one time, it's bad for the seller because and the buyers gets an advantage because you end up taking off too much. Again, because you end up taking off too little. If you do it at one shot, you end up taking off too little, and therefore it's good for the purchaser. He ends up more than what he paid for. Again, heaping is part of the selling process, but you have to be fair. It has to be an appropriate heap that the seller agrees to and the buyer agrees to. Don't, little by little start smoothing off the vessel, because that's disadvantage to the purchaser because you're taking off more, and it's great for the seller because again, you're taking off more and he's selling for the same price less. So the Gemara says like this: Al Kulan Om Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Everything Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was talking about teaching how to be honest in business. The problem, if you teach people how to be honest in business, the people who are crooks are going to learn how to do thievery, because I didn't know you can do that. So he said like this: certain things are oily. Im oima. I am, and woe to me if I tell everybody these halachas, because oily im lo oima. It's bad if I don't say anything. He said like this: Im oimer. If I tell everybody these halachas, you can see what the problem is. Shema yomru haramoim. Shema yilmedu haramoim. The people who are crooked people, they're going to learn a new trick. Vim lo yamar, if I'm not going to tell you, Shemi, if I'm not going to tell you, Shemi Yamar Hamoim, maybe the real people who do tricks, who are crooked people, they're going to say, Ein Talmid Chachamim B'kiyim B'Ma'aseh Yadenu. The Talmid Chachamim don't know what's going on. You know, they're too naive. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was always unsure how to teach these halachas. It's almost like you teach certain types of topics in yeshiva, and it's not you don't know. You're teaching a naive person how to do something trickery. So the question is, Amra lo Amra, did Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai teach these halachas or not? Amra Shmuel bar Yitzchak, Amra, he did teach it. Mahaikra Amra, you always teach it. Ki Sharm Darchei Hashem. But tzaddikim yelchu bam u'poishim yikashlu bam. Tzaddikim, the derech Hashem is straight, and tzaddikim, righteous people, will go in that way, and those who want to see bad will see bad, whether you teach it to them or not. We had this question once in yeshiva. They were teaching Masechta, first parak of Masechta Ksubas, which first parak of Masechta Ksubas for a 13-year-old is like maybe too rated for such a young child. But they teach it anyway because Yisharim Darchei Hashem Tzadikim Yelchubam Uposhim Yikashlubam. You teach it anyway, and it's Torah, and it's holy, and there's a protection there. So that's what the Gemara says. Torah Rabbanim Loisasu Avel. The pasuk says Loisasu. You should not do Avel, corruption. But Mishpat, when you're a judge. Not every person's a judge. When are you a judge? You're a shopkeeper. Bamida, when you're measuring things out. Bamishkal, when you're weighing things. Uvamsura, or when you're selling liquid. Bamida, when you're measuring things out. Zumididis karka. If you're doing a measurement of land and you're dividing up, let's say, you're dividing up a piece of land between you and your partner. One should not measure use the rope, the measuring rope in the summer months when it's taut. And somebody uses it in the winter months, because what's going to happen is that during the winter months it's wet, and therefore maybe it's bending a little bit, and the other side is going to get more than what he paid for, or what you're dividing it up for. In other words, the measuring rope has to be for both used in the same season. Bamishko, when you're weighing things, let's say you have weights, right? And that you use on your scale. The halacha is that you shouldn't preserve your weights in salt, because salt erodes the weight. So let's say you have a lead weight and you put it in salt, it's going to erode it. So it's going to say 2 pounds on it, but really it's less than 2 pounds. Bamshura, when you're pouring liquid, shloyar tiach. You should not, like when you pour like champagne, so it foams up. So make sure when someone buys some liquid from you, you have to make sure he gets filled up to the tippy top, and not that what's filling it up is foam. The kavachoyma and imam meshura she echem mishloisha shishem ug hikpidal of Torah. Meshura we know is like 1/36 of a lug. That means you rip somebody off such a minute amount, like a little drop, you ripped him off. He's supposed to get it filled up to the top, and there's a minute amount that's foam. Hikpida all of Torah. The Torah was very makbid. Don't rip somebody off. If you're selling larger amounts of liquid, you got to make sure that it's filled to the top and that there's no foam there. That makes it look like it's full to the top, but really it's not. So the Torah is very makbid, even if you're selling a little bit. Certainly, if you're selling a lot of volume, you should not have the foam there. Now the Gemara starts off and discusses what happens. Can I have a faulty? You know how you buy undershirts, that are tagged that's faulty, and you pay less for them. So a guy decides to buy a faulty measuring cup. Okay, it says over here it's a liter, but really it was marked wrong. So are you allowed to purchase that and have that in your home? Now, why would you have that in your home? Your intention is not to rip anybody off, but your intention is to use, let's say, for a bedpan or something like that, to use it not for measuring. So Rabbi Yehuda Amarav said, A faulty measuring cup, you're not allowed to even have it in your house. Okay, even if you're using it as a urinal. Let's say you have this faulty measuring cup and you're using it as a urinal. Still, you're not allowed to have it in your house. Why? Because sometimes you're going to start selling something and you don't have your regular cup and you're just going to wash out the urinal and use it as your measuring cup. But that measuring cup is a faulty measuring cup. So the Rav said you're not allowed to even have such a faulty measuring cup in your house. Amar Papa said like this. He qualified it. He said like this. Loy Amram. They didn't say that you're not allowed to have it. In a city that measuring cups don't have a hechsher on it. Let's say in a city that no buyer will buy from without you showing the measuring cup that has a seal of kashrus on it. If the purchaser is not going to see that kashrus seal on your measuring cup, he's not going to buy. So therefore, in that case, if everybody has if the city requires a hechsher on your measuring cup, so therefore you're allowed to have a faulty measuring cup that doesn't have a hechsher in it and use it as a urinal because you'll never be able to use it in real life. In a city that they even if there was no seal on the cup, but we didn't say that you're not allowed to keep it, only if in certain places where they don't have, let's say, inspectors that come around. If there's inspectors that are always inspecting the measuring cups, even though they don't put a seal on a kosher measuring cups, it's still considered to be a not a problem to have the extra one in your house. So now the Gemara says, "V'loihi," it's not so. No matter what, even if it's a city that has hachsherim on the measuring cups, you're never allowed to have a faulty measuring cup in your house. Why? Because zimnem the mikre benishmasis. Let's say a purchaser will come to you Friday afternoon, and you're looking around for a measuring cup, and you're going to use the one that doesn't have a seal on it. Or mikre v'shakal, you're going to use that one, your faulty measuring cup. So you're not allowed to even have this in your house because it could lead to you stealing from somebody. Fantastic. Tanya Namihocha, we learned in the Braisha, Lo Yasha Oda Mide Chasera Yaser B'Soich Beisai. A person's not allowed to have a faulty measuring cup that's mismarked by a little or more. Even if you're using it as a urinal, still you're not allowed to have that in your house. Says the Gemara. Now the Brisa continues and says, how did they make measuring cups? Different size cups. So you can't make it any size you want. Let's say, do you know of a measuring cup that's a quarter of a liter or a third of a liter? There are certain standards that Chachamim issued that the manufacturers of measuring cups, they have to stick to these size. You make measuring cups saw, which is 6 kavs, tarkav or 3 kav, the chatzi tarkav or something that's 1.5 kav, the kav, the chatzi kav. These are the measuring cups. It should be a kav or half a kav. The roiva is a quarter of a lug. The toimen is a half a lug, which is like 3 eggs. The chatzi toimen, you make a measuring cup that's 1.5 eggs, which is basically, that is the shear of like a kiddush cup, is 1.5 eggs, if you want to know. Okay, and this is just measuring. And the ukla, and you make a measuring cup. We go to Tzadik Aman Aleph, the size of a ukla. The kamayi ukla. What is an ukla? Echad mechamisha b'revia. That's 1 egg and 1/5 of an egg. So that is the smallest measure of if you're measuring, let's say, powder for somebody, or you're measuring out sugar for somebody, something that's solid. What about midas halach? What about the liquid measuring cups? So hu oisa hin, you make one that's hin, that's 12 lugs, right? The chatzia hin and a half a hin, which is 6 lugs, shlishas a hin, revias a hin, a quarter of a hin. The lug and 1 lug, the chatzi lug, which is 1.5 eggs. Revius is a quarter of a lug, which is a quarter of an egg. Revius is a quarter of a. I'm sorry. Revius is 1.5 eggs. Ushminis and half of that, which is a 3/4 of an egg. I mean, 3/4 of an egg, like a schnapps, a little more than a schnapps cup. And 1/64 of a lug, like a tiny, 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 because sometimes you're measuring out very expensive, let's say, whiskey. So then you can make these cups into very, very small sizes. So one thing that the Gemara is just going to get back to, you notice we went from by solids, we went from a saw, which is 6 kavim, 3 kavim, and then we jumped to 1.5 kav. So we went from 6, 3, and then to 1.5. Why don't we make a measuring cup? The Gemara is going to ask a question. But nami kabayim. Let's make a measuring cup for solids that could hold 2 kavs. Why do we jump from 3 to 1.5? Answers the Gemara, Ose lechalufe betarkav, because a 2 kav will be confused with 3 kav. In other words, a purchaser is going to pay for 3 kavs, and the seller is going to use a 2 kav cup and to measure it out. And the purchaser is not going to know the difference if the seller is using a 2 kav cup or a 3 kav cup. So therefore, they never made a 2 kav cup. So Alma, so we see from here, a person could make a mistake, tilsa by a third. A 2 kav cup looks like a 3 kav cup, and you can make that mistake and confuse the two. If people make mistakes by a third, if so, kav nami le'levet. Don't make a kav. Because then a kav, you should never make a kav cup, if that it holds a kav, because it can be confused with a cup that holds 1.5 kav, because that's a third more. A 1.5 kav cup, and the next one is a kav. Why? You could always confuse that too. And the purchaser, again, will pay for 3 kavs, and the seller is going to use a kav cup. The purchaser is going to pay for a 1.5 kav, and the seller is going to use a kav cup to measure them out. Ella, truth is, for third, people don't make a mistake. El kabayim, the reason why we never made a 2 kav cup, Hainu timer, that's the reason. The loy ovid, we don't make it. The osi lechlufe bechatzi tarkav, because then you can make a mistake with a 1.5 kav. So if you make a 2 kav cup, it can be confused with a 1.5 kav cup. So again, a person's going to pay for 2 kavs, and the seller is going to measure them out with 1.5 kav, and it looks like a 2 kav cup. So 1.5 to 2 kavs is a mistake of a quarter. So it's a little bit smaller than a third. Almost, so we see from here, toy inish, a person makes a mistake, riva on a quarter. A person makes a mistake by a quarter of a cup. So a quarter, measuring cups that look a quarter bigger, a person can make a mistake. So the Gemara asks the question, if that is correct, chatzi tumim be'ukla loy. Don't make a chatzi tumim. A chatzi tumim, we said, was 1.5 eggs, and a ukla is 1.1/5 egg, which is a quarter more. Why don't we make that distinction? Amra Papa midas katanas bekia behu in shape. A person, that's more than a quarter. If once it gets to a small size, you can tell the difference between the two different cups. Once you get to smaller amount of measuring cups, you'll be able to tell the difference between which is bigger. But a bigger size, again, it's optical illusions the Gemara is dealing with. When you have a cup, a large size measuring cup, and another large size measuring cup, which is a quarter bigger, it's very hard for you to tell the difference between the two. In fact, they look similar, and it's an optical illusion that looks similar. And because it can look similar, the purchaser will pay for more, and the seller is going to measure it out in the cup that's less. So that's why when they gave the standard of how to make measuring cups, they made it so that when you're a buyer, you can tell which measuring cup the seller is using to measure out your purchase. Amar Papa said, if you tell me that people make a mistake of a quarter, then in the liquid parts, why do we make one measuring cup a third of a hin, and one part a quarter of a hin? But a quarter is the quarter, they look similar. One's bigger by a quarter, by 25%. And you said that when they look so similar, people can make a mistake. Answers the Gemara, Kivin the Hava b'migdash like Gaza barabanim. Since these measuring of Shlishas and Revi'as, these were measuring cups that existed in the base of Migdash. The Gemara, the Chazal, when they gave the standard in commerce, they didn't want to change to say that in the Beis Hamikdash it's permitted to have such measuring cups, and in commerce you're not allowed to have such measuring cups, so they didn't make that change. And b'mikdash nami le'ligzar, why did we make in the Beis Hamikdash Revi'ah Sehin and Shlisha Sehin? Because Kahanim's reason him. Kahanim don't make mistakes. They're very sharp people. They don't make mistakes. So in the Beis Hamikdash, they allowed Shlisha Sehin and Revi'ah Sehin. So they, even though it's possible to make that mistake, to be confused between the two, but they didn't. They when they established in commerce, they allowed the Shlisha Sehin and Revi'ah Sehin. New Gemara. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel said, let's say you have a measuring, let's say a gallon, right? What's called a gallon? So let's say the city cannot decide to increase the volume of a gallon more than a sixth. They can't increase the normal measures, let's say a gallon, to say it includes a sixth more. They can't increase it by 16%. And you can't increase the value of a coin more than 16%. If you're trying to make a profit, you can't mark up your items more than a sixth more. 16% is your profit, which is very difficult to understand. It's like communism. But it's talking about specific items, probably items that are necessities, food items, or something like that. In the Chachamim, Shmuel said, the Chachamim limited you how much profit you can make. Let's see the first thing. Why can't I increase the value of a gallon? Let's say a gallon is a certain amount, and say we all decided that the gallon should be a sixth more. My tama. Because the prices will increase. Once you increase the volume of the measure of the gallon, so the prices will increase. And in fact, the prices are going to increase more than the volume that you increase. So that leads to inflation. So then shtus nami. Then even if it's less than a shtus, a sixth, you should never be allowed to increase measuring cups, right? Ella, says the Gemara, Mishum Oina. The Gemara says a fascinating thing, because somebody's going to get ripped off. The loyla have a bittul mekach, because we're going to destroy businesses. What's going to happen? The seller doesn't realize they're going to come to the seller's business, and the seller, let's say he's selling sugar, so they're going to come to the seller's business and says, "Here's the new measuring cup for a gallon." So he doesn't realize that the sugar that he has to supply in that new measuring cup is bigger by a sixth, and he's going to sell more, but he's going to sell it at the old price. And when he finds that out, he's gonna call back the sale, and there's gonna be a lot of callbacks and recalls on transactions. So therefore, you never get more than a sixth. So the Gemara says, "V'amar Rava." Rava said, "Kol davar shebemida v'shemiga v'sheminyan." If it's something that you're measuring in a cup, afilu pachas b'kdei not kaiser. Why do you tell me that? Oh, a sixth more you can't add, even if it's less than a sixth. The seller, if he feels that he got ripped off, that he gave too much sugar at the old price, because you enlarged his measuring cup, even if you didn't enlarge it by six, even if you enlarged it only by an eighth, it should be a problem, because he can always recall the sale." Answers the Gemara, to have a pseida l'tagora. There should not be a loss for the businessman. A loss for the businessman. We don't want any losses over here. That a businessman, he'll raise the price, but he's going to raise the price, but we're going to increase the measuring cup. So we don't want that there should be a loss. He's not going to get ripped off because he's going to raise his price. We're not concerned he's not going to raise his price. He will raise his price, but he'll raise his price by a sixth, and will increase the volume of the cup, the volume of the measuring cup by a sixth. So Gemara says, but that's a problem. Say he's not going to lose any money because he raised his prices, but he's not going to make any profit because he's raising his prices, but you're increasing the amount that he has to give. If somebody just sells things but doesn't make a profit, you call him a businessman? So what is the reason the Gemara is getting to this understanding? What is the reason that, let's say the city has a gallon, let's say a cup that's a gallon. They can't get together and say they increase the size of this gallon cup by a 6. What is the reason they can't do that? So Gemara reaches and says, actually, it's a pasuk in Navi. Elamar Chizdam Shmuel Kra Ashkech Darash. Shekel Esrim Gera Esrim Shkolim Chamisha Esrim Shkolim Asura v'Chamisha Shekel Hamona Lechem. The pasuk is describing what a mana is, and it says a mana is based on 60 shekels. Okay, the Gemara, the pasuk adds it up. 60 shekels. Now, 60 shekels, every shekel has 4 dinars, 4 like quarters, let's say. So 4 times 60, 4 times 60 is 240, correct? So 240 shekels. So now a mana has 240 dinars, 240 dinars. So now that's the mana of Hegdish. So a mana has Masayim Ba'aboin Hava. Can a mana have 240 dinars? Even if it's a moist mana of Hegdish. Mana of a regular, we know a mana, let's say the ksuba of an almana is a mana, which is 100 dinars. So, and a Hegdish is always double. A mana of a Hegdish money is called, the currency of Hegdish was double, so it would be 200. But how could the Pasuk say that the mana of Hegdish was 240? We increased the coins. We increased the amount per coin by a 6th. Shmamino, we see 3 ideas over here. Shmamino mana shel kodesh kafel haya. Or really, the mana, that the currency that was used in the Beis Hamikdash or used for holy items was double, like the Vatican currency, the Havdol. There's a certain currency that's double of the regular mana that was used in business. Ushmamina Maisifin alamidas ve'maisifin yois mishus. You can add to the value of a coin, but you can't add more than a 6th. So, which is, if originally it was 100 zuz, 100 dinars, now the regular money is 120. And because of that, the mana of Hegdish was 240. So they added a 6. They made a 6 from the outside. In other words, when they added a 6, they didn't. They made it 120. They didn't make it 125. You could add a 6. You could make a 6 by dividing everything in 4s and then just adding, like say, make it 125. But they added a 6 from the outside. So by adding 20, now you'd make it into 6 pieces. Anyway, that's how you add 6. Says the Gemara, Rapapa Bashmuel, we'll stop in a minute. Rapapa Bashmuel, Taking Talia Batlase Kifize. He made a new measuring cup. His measuring cup was called a 9-lug measuring cup, right? Amrle, they told him, you can't add more than a 6. And therefore, the other measuring cups maybe had 6 lugs or 4 lugs, and you're making a new measuring cup called a 9-lug. Amalei, he said, I'm not making a new measuring cup based on the old cups. I'm making a brand new business, a brand new one-time cup. In other words, it's not related to the other measuring cups. So Shadre le Pumpadisa, they sent Rab Papa's new measuring cup to Pumpadisa, V'loi Kiblu, and it wasn't accepted into the business world. Shadre le Pampanu, they sent it to Papanu, V'kiblu, and they used it because people needed measuring cups that hold 9 lug. The Korele, and they called that measuring cup Rose Papa. That's the measuring cup of Papa. Again, it wasn't, he added to other measuring cup, he started a brand new line, which was the 9 lug. Maybe it only had one, a single type of measuring cup, but it was called Papa, and it was used in some places, but not used in other places. Okay, we continue with the sugya of how to be honest in business tomorrow.
Thank you.